Today we're discussing some NHL trade rumors around the Florida Panthers, the Edmonton Oilers, and the San Jose Sharks. Plus, we're going to look at some reports indicating that the New York Islanders are pretty heavy after free agent Nazem Kadri and how that could fit into their lineup, what subsequent trades they may have to make to be cap compliant. Plus, we have some other signings as well. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and some trade rumors to take a look at here today, as well as a big UFA rumor to look at as well with Nazem Kadri. Now, before we jump into today's news, I just want to take a quick moment to take a look back at an important moment here in hockey history. On this day, 10 years ago, the Nashville Predators announced they were matching one of the largest offer sheets, if I believe the biggest offer sheet ever in NHL history. Of course, the Philadelphia Flyers had tendered an offer sheet to RFA defenseman Shea on a massive $110 million deal over 14 years. Of course, those contracts are no longer legal in the NHL. And of course, Shea did not complete the deal. We all know how things worked out. All these years later, he'll finish the last number of years on long-term injury reserve. But certainly in the case of Shea that was a massive contract, a massive offer sheet. The Nashville Predators ultimately ended up matching. And of course, a number of years later, traded him to the Montreal Canadiens in that massive trade for PK Subban. So certainly, with all the talk that we might see another offer sheet possibly this summer in the next few weeks, it's hard to say what the odds are, but there's some that think it could happen with some of the RFAs that are remaining out there. With this day 10 years ago, I just want to take a look back and see what had happened way back then. Now, some other signings here today. The Seattle Kraken have announced a couple of signings. They've avoided arbitration with RFA forward Morgan Geekie. He gets a one-year deal valued at $1.4 million. Didn't have a fantastic year in Seattle last year. Of course, he was their selection from the Carolina Hurricanes organization in the expansion draft. Of course, Ron Francis was, the GM there when Geekie was drafted, so very familiar with the player. He only put up 7 goals and 22 points during last year. So we'll see if he can build upon that. He is going to have a tougher time getting the bigger, more offensive minutes. So the Kraken have certainly made a lot of additions this year in the offseason here. They do have a lot of forwards that likely will play ahead of them in the lineup. Michael Kepney has also been signed by the Seattle Kraken, a depth signing on defense. Gets a one-year deal, a one-way contract as well, $750,000. So hard to say where he'll be. He'll likely be a number 6-7 guy for the Seattle Kraken. There's also reports from Craig Morgan covering the Arizona Coyotes looking at Louis Eriksson. The UFA is still looking to play into the coming year. Right now, it does not appear like there's any NHL opportunities. Of course, really shouldn't be a huge surprise. At one point, Louis Eriksson was really looked upon as being a pretty solid hockey player. He had some good years between his time in Dallas, Boston, but things never really worked out for him on the UFA contract in Vancouver. The last number of years, it's been all downhill, and it looks like he's heading to Europe, most likely going to Sweden, but apparently there is some potential opportunities he's exploring in Switzerland as well. But expect Louis to continue playing, just not in the NHL any longer. And then Minnesota Wild have also placed prospect Alexander Hovhanov on unconditional waivers for the purpose of contract termination. I believe he still had 1 year left on his rookie contract, which will not be completed. They've mutually come to terms to part ways, and it's expected he will return and try to make a career over in Russia. And the Wild will ultimately move on from this prospect. Now on to the UFA rumors of the day. Nazem Kadri, of course, the biggest name out there on the market. You also got John Klingberg, Paul Stastny, and a few others that are still looking or making decisions on where they're going to land. Of course, many believe that some of these players are waiting for teams to clear cap space in order to be signed. That's what's holding things up, and it does make a lot of sense, of course. In the case of Nazem Kadri, though, Kevin Kurz of the Athletic beat writer for the New York Islanders, his latest article suggests that they are likely making a push to sign Kadri and bring him to Long Island. Of course, we know that the Islanders have been exceptionally quiet this offseason. Lou Lamoriello had a couple of key things on the agenda. Of course, he fired Barry Trotz, so we didn't take long to find out who the new coach was going to be. He went internally to that with Lane Lambert. And then, of course, from there, it was well known that they wanted to find another top 6 forward to play with Matthew Barzal, and they also would like to have another top 4 defenseman, preferably somebody to play on the left side. It's kind of been a hole back there in that blue line since they moved Nick Leddy. Of course, that was a necessary cap move, but they've never really replaced them either internally or externally, and there's still as a hole back there. They can use a good puck moving defenseman who can help on that side of the ice for sure. And of course, they need to be able to score more goals. They're certainly expected. I think it's fair to say the Islanders, as much as you don't want to see them not do anything here, the Islanders to me could be a better team next year just by having a healthy season, not having that crazy road trip at the beginning of the year and being hit hard by COVID. Having a normal season with a relatively healthy lineup will make a significant difference. However, that Metropolitan Division is pretty darn tough. We've seen some other teams make moves that are already strong, that are already continuing to stay strong, or other teams getting better, and it's not going to be any easy task. At this point, I think the Philadelphia Flyers appear to be a bit of a mess still. I think they have a lot of decisions. A lot of things never really materialized in the Flyers offseason, at least not yet. So, they might be better than Philly. New Jersey, I think it's fair to say that they've done a few things here. I'm not sure how much better the Devils are going to be. I guess we're going to have to wait and see. I do think it's fair to say with what they've done now, they should be a little bit better, but of course they were still near the bottom of the standings. But the New York Rangers are going to bounce back after being a Final Four team. I would fully suspect they'll be near the top of the division again. You can never count out the Pittsburgh Penguins. Look how they did last year, although they are coming back with largely the same group, another year older. Will they finally regress? We keep saying it's going to happen, but those of us who have said it have been wrong. So I suspect they're definitely going to be in the playoff mix, to say the least. Washington's an interesting team too. Without Nick Backstrom there for at least the first half of the year, maybe the entire year, I do wonder. They're another team that has a lot of their stars getting older. Some are slowing down, some aren't. Of course, Ovechkin's still strong, but they're you can't really count out them either. Pittsburgh and Washington are just those teams that you think they're going to go away, and they're just not. It's just that simple. You get the Rangers there, like I said. You get the Carolina Hurricanes, who appears to have found some scoring help themselves, which is what the case of the Islanders were looking for. Would have been a great deal for Lou to get Max Pacioretty for nothing. That would have been great, but of course never happened. Obviously, at that point, he would have had to move some money out, but he's going to have to do that regardless of what he does. That was a prime opportunity wasted, in my opinion, for the Islanders. But of course, those are four teams right there that are arguably, better already. And then, of course, like I said, you have teams like the other ones in the division here. The Devils are going to be a bit better. The Flyers, I don't think they're going to be right now, but you just never know. Then, of course, you get a team like Columbus, who just signed Johnny Gaudreau. Patrick Laine should be there for a full year and playing, under a new coach for a full season. Of course, last year started under Tortorella. The Columbus is bound to be better too. So they need to get their act together and get something done here, or they're going to have a tough time, in my opinion. But like I said, they can continue to play, with a lot of these guys and have success. But is the new coach going to be able to make this happen? Adding Nazem Kadri could be a major addition, but is it really the ideal player they need? Not really, but they could rejig their lineup to kind of make things work. You might look at their lineup and say, well, they're already pretty strong down the middle. They have Brock Nelson, Matthew Barzal, JG Pageau. Sure, but maybe, and just maybe here with Kurz's article, suggests that it might be better for Barzal to swing over to the right wing. Ultimately, it might allow him to play a little looser and be a little bit more dynamic offensively instead of having all that extra responsibility on the ice. We know Barzal enjoys playing center. Would he be open to moving to the wing if he thought he was going to be able to contribute more offensively? He could still help out on faceoffs. If he played on a line with Kadri, to me, that's it could be a good duo. You can have one be on the left side strong on faceoff, one on the other side strong on faceoffs. There's a dynamic there to like. Ultimately, they'd have to move some money out. You're talking about your common usual suspects here, whether it be Varlamov, Beauvillier, or Bailey. I don't really think Lou seems to be interested in moving Varlamov. He wants to keep that tandem together another year with him and Sorokin. So if that doesn't happen, you're going to have to move Bailey or Beauvillier. I don't think with the way that the market seems to be on taking bad contracts, there's lots of teams that could do it, but it's going to be a hefty price tag, and moving Josh Bailey might just prove to be a little bit too much. I mean, look at the problems you've seen a team like the Flyers run into with astronomical prices. So moving Bailey with 2 years left might just be a little crazy. You might have to move something with a little bit more value to it, like a Beauvillier, for example. And of course, it might even need to be possibly more than that. They still have to sign Noah Dobson. He's going to need a fairly substantial contract, a big raise. We don't know how that's turning out here just yet, so it's really difficult to say what they're going to move out of their roster to have a real shot at getting a guy like Kadri on the books. But ultimately, there is some hope there that they could play with a top line of like Nelson, Lee, Palmieri, but with Kadri, Barzal, and either like Beauvillier or Wahlstrom, depending on who they trade. And you still have guys like Parise and Pajot for your third line. You got your identity line for your fourth line. Your third line, of course, with Parise and Pajot, you could either go with Bellows or Wahlstrom or whoever doesn't get moved, I guess, right? Amongst that forward group, there's a lot to like about a Kadri addition. I think it could really work. Now in Florida, after making them blockbuster trade to acquire Matthew Tkachuk, they're certainly in desperate need of moving some money out. There's no doubt about it. They will have to move a player, and it's not going to be from their decor. After trading Mackenzie Weegar, I think they're already weak enough here on the back end. That decor has been weakened. He was arguably their second best defenseman. He's in line for a big payday. They probably thought they were going to have a tough time keeping him on an extension, even though a lot of reporters said that was their preference. I think that's why Bill Zito decided to include him in the package here. It was just between him and Huberdeau. I think he knew he was losing at least one of them anyway. So you have a chance to bring Tkachuk back. That explains why they decided to pull the trigger on this deal. But they're over $3 million over the cap. Now, a lot of people are pointing to a simple solution here is trade Patrick Hornqvist. He's got 1 year left, over $5.5 million, but he does have a modified no trade clause. Ultimately, he may not be willing to go where you need him to go because there's only certain teams with cap space that can take him. And it might be really challenging to get that deal done. Look at a team like Columbus. After signing Johnny Gaudreau, I thought they would move Gus Nyquist, 1 year left at $5 million. He's younger than Hornqvist and more productive, and they ended up moving Oliver Bjorkstrand. And that was apparently, according to Guillermo Kekalainen, the ugly side of the business, the cost of doing business, if you will. Teams are exploiting them, like teams like this, to get a better value player out of them for almost nothing. So they might not be in a situation where they can just move Hornqvist for something cheap. They may not have a choice but to move a player with more value, whether it be like an Anthony Duclair who's injured right now. That might have to wait. Of course, that's like he'd be a prime candidate, but he's hurt. Then you've got like Verhaeghe, Bennett, Reinhart. Is it like I'm sure there was not players they want to move, but it might not be something that they don't have a choice. I think they would be very much interested in trading Bobrovsky. There's been lots of rumors and speculation that they've heavily explored that, but him making $10 million and having a no-move clause really, really complicates that, and it's just not something that we're likely going to see, at least not anytime soon. So ultimately, the Panthers do have to make a subsequent move. It's not something that's really being talked about a lot, but they don't have a choice. So teams that are looking for a forward, it might be a team to contact. Now, of course, that decor, like I said, has been weakened now without Weegar back there. Looking at this Florida Panther team, I do like the Tkachuk addition. I like their top forwards, and the top six group is a good mix. Might even be better than before, depending on who they have to move out. But now the back end's not as good. So, ultimately, if they move a forward for a defenseman who maybe has if you can find a deal out there that you like that's either younger or, just a good value for a contract that can really grow with the team and make less money for just a little while you're waiting for the salary cap situation to change, might be ideal. So if you can find a good, valued defenseman for, $1 million, $1.5 million, something to that effect that you think can play a bigger role than his contract indicates, would be your ideal candidate. That's not going to be easy to do, but Bill Zito and the Panthers have been really, really strong at finding value and getting some players that are on cheap deals overperforming. So we'll see where this goes, but do expect more moves from the Panthers as they don't have a choice. The San Jose Sharks are another team I want to take a look at, and Timo Meier. There was an article in San Jose Hockey Now from Shang Pang looking at Meier as a potential either sign or trade candidate. Of course, he's another RFA in the similar situation that we might see here with Matthew Tkachuk. Now, of course, different kind of player, but some similarities. 1 year difference in age. Meier has been a little more inconsistent than Tkachuk. Tkachuk definitely has better numbers overall. Fair to say he has a stronger career so far, but Meier's a guy who's a 2-time 30-goal scorer, something he has in common with Matthew Tkachuk. He has a power aspect to his game, another aspect you have in common, and ultimately can be, a consistent, or at least appears like he could be a consistent 70 to 80 point player, 30, 35 goals. There's lots to like. He's only 25, but the way his last contract was structured, he's a pending RFA next year, and his qualifying offer that's due is $10 million. So if he wants to push it and doesn't want to agree to a more fair value contract, he can get himself a 1-year contract at $10 million next year. So we'll see what they do, but we know the new GM, Mike Greer, already traded Brent Burns. He's already seems to be, concerned about how many long-term big money deals they have. They're certainly looking at restructuring the team and kind of retooling here. I don't necessarily think that Meier's a guy that they'd have circled as an absolute player to trade, but the whole premise of this article is that now that you've seen Matthew Tkachuk get traded, it might make you stop and think before you sign this guy either to a short-term $10 million deal, or if you can convince him to go 7-8 years on another, $8 to $9 million. He's not going to get as much money as Tkachuk, but if Tkachuk's getting 9.5, he might get 8.5, or maybe between 8.5 and 9. That's possible based on his age and performance so far and what his projections are. And, do they want another contract on the books that long term with that much money? As much as they've been an underperforming team for the last few years, they already have a lot of long-term deals that they'd probably rather not have. And as much as Meier would be one that would be, possibly a better deal, more team-friendly than the others, I just don't know what the appetite is for Greer to go down that road. So I've seen the return that Calgary got might make them stop and think, and they may consider a trade. I know if the Islanders don't trade Kadri, this is another prime candidate that would be perfect for their team. But are they going to want to give up the assets to get it done? That's the whole tough part here. If San Jose doesn't have to move them, and if they're not going to get a sweet deal like Calgary did, then they may hold back. So we'll see. But another player to keep our eye on here over the next year. The Edmonton Oilers are another team that need to make a move. They desperately need cap space. They don't really have much of any, and they have 3 RFAs that need signing or to be moved. You got Ryan McLeod, who's definitely going to get signed and be a part of the future. You got Kaylor Yamamoto, and then, of course, you have Jesse Puljujarvi. Puljujarvi's a name that's been in the rumor mill, but Warren Foegele's another name that apparently the Oilers are trying to move in order to create some space to get some of these under contract, but it's going to take more than Warren Foegele. They hardly have any contract signing space right now on the cap space at all. And with these 3 players, even if you only get, let's say McLeod's not going to have a huge, asking price. But let's say he gets, $1.5 million. And then Yamamoto and Puljujarvi, even if they got $2 or $3 million each, like somewhere's in that range, it's not a lot of money, but you get 3 guys, it might cost you, $6 to $7 million to sign them all, and they hardly have any space at all. Trading Warren Foegele is not going to get it done. They've already gotten some free cap space from Duncan Keith retiring, basically. They already moved Zach Kassian as well in a cost-cutting trade. And another one likely seems like it's going to have to happen here. Now, if they don't sign Puljujarvi, they can move him instead, bring back a future base asset, draft pick, something to that effect. That might make things a little bit easier here as well. It would reduce the amount of money they need to send out. So that could be what it is. Otherwise, they might be forced to move Tyson Barrie, which many people, myself included, thought they might be able to keep after all once Duncan Keith retired. I'm sure they don't really want to take Keith and Barrie off that blue line, but something might have to give depending on which of these RFAs are a part of this team's future or who ends up moving on. So let me know your thoughts on the trades and the news here today in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.